Gary Leon Ridgway is an American serial killer known as the Green River Killer and the Green River Strangler, who was convicted of murdering 49 women between 1982 and 1988 in the northwest of America. At the time of his arrest in 2001, Ridgway was believed to have been the most prolific serial killer in American history, according to confirmed murders. Most of his victims were alleged to be sex workers and other women in vulnerable circumstances, including underage runaways. Before his identity was known, the media gave him the nickname after the first 5 victims were found in the Green River. He strangled his victims, usually by hand and sometimes using ligatures. After strangling them, he would dump their bodies in forested, overgrown areas in King County, often returning to the bodies to engage in acts of necrophilia. Ridgway had been a suspect in the murders since 1982, however, investigators were unable to link him to the murders at that time. Later advances in DNA profiling allowed investigators to definitively link Ridgway to the murders, and he was arrested on the 30th of November 2001 as he was leaving the Kentworth truck factory where he worked in Renton, Washington. As a part of a plea bargain, he agreed to disclose the locations of still missing women. He was spared the death penalty and received a sentence of life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Gary Ridgway was born on the 18th of February 1949 in Salt Lake City, Utah, the second of Mary and Thomas Ridgway's 3 sons. His home life was somewhat troubled. Relatives have described his mother as domineering and have said that, while young, he witnessed more than one violent argument between his parents. His father was a bus driver who would often complain about the presence of sex workers. Ridgway and his brothers would face corporal punishment from his mother with belts or sticks for minor offences. He would later tell defence psychologists that, as an adolescent, he had conflicting feelings of anger and sexual attraction towards his mother and fantasised about killing her. Ridgway is dyslexic and was held back a year in high school. When he was 16, he stabbed a 6-year-old boy who survived the attack. Ridgway had led the boy into the woods and then stabbed him through the ribs into his liver. Ridgway's IQ was recorded as being in the low 80s. Ridgway graduated from Tylee High School in 1969 and married his 19-year-old high school girlfriend Claudia Craig. He joined the United States Navy and was sent to Vietnam, where he served on board a supply ship and saw combat. During his time in the military, Ridgway had frequent sexual intercourse with sex workers and contracted gonorrhea. Although angered by this, he continued this activity without protection. The marriage ended within a year. When questioned about Ridgway after his arrest, friends and family described him as friendly but strange. His first 2 marriages resulted in divorce because of infidelities by both partners. His second wife, Marcia Winslow, claimed that he'd placed her in a chokehold. He became religious during his second marriage, proselytizing door to door, reading the Bible out loud at work and at home, and insisting that his wife follow the strict teachings of the pastor. Ridgway would also frequently cry after sermons or reading the Bible. Despite his beliefs, he continued to solicit the services of sex workers and wanted his wife to participate in sex in public and inappropriate places, sometimes even in areas where his victims' bodies were later discovered. According to women in his life, Ridgway had insatiable sexual appetite. His 3 ex-wives and several ex-girlfriends reported that he demanded sex from them several times a day. Often he would want to have sex in a public area or in the woods. Ridgway himself admitted to having a fixation with sex workers with whom he had a love-hate relationship. He frequently complained about their presence in his neighbourhood, but he also took advantage of their services regularly. In a statement read in his plea hearing, he said that he hated prostitutes and didn't want to pay them for sex. Some have speculated that he was torn between his lusts and his staunch religious beliefs. With his second wife, Marcia, Ridgway had a son. Throughout the 1980s and 1990s, Ridgway is believed to have murdered at least 71 teenage girls and women in Seattle and Tacoma, Washington. In court statements, Ridgway later reported that he'd killed so many that he'd lost count. A majority of the murders occurred between 1982 and 1984. The victims were believed to have either been sex workers or runaways whom he had picked up along Pacific Highway South. Ridgway sometimes showed the women a picture of his son to trick them into trusting him. They would engage in sexual activity, and minutes after intercourse from behind, Ridgway would wrap his forearm around the front of their necks and use the other arm to pull back as tightly as he could, strangling them. He killed most of his victims in his home, his truck, or a secluded area. Most of their bodies were dumped in wooded areas around the Green River, Seattle-Tacoma International Airport, and other dump sites within South King County. There were also 2 confirmed and other 2 suspected victims found in the Portland, Oregon area. The bodies were found left in clusters, sometimes posed, usually nude. He would sometimes return to the victims' bodies and engage in necrophilia with their bodies. He later explained that he didn't find necrophilia more sexually satisfying, but having sex with the deceased reduced his need to obtain a living victim and thus limited his exposure to being caught. He occasionally contaminated the dump sites with gum, cigarettes, and written materials belonging to others, and even transported a few victims' remains across straight lines into Oregon to confuse the police. The body of Ridgway's first known victim was found in July 1982. A unique kind of spray paint was found on clothing wrapped around the victim's neck, but the paint was not tested for 20 years. If it had been tested at the time, it would have been easier to link the murder to Ridgway. After 4 more women were found, the King County Sheriff's Office formed the Green River Task Force to investigate the murders. Task Force members included Robert Keppel and David Raichert, who periodically interviewed incarcerated serial killer Ted Bundy in 1984. Bundy offered opinions on the psychology, motivations, and behaviour of the killer. He suggested that the killer was revisiting the dump sites to have sex with his victims, which turned out to be true. And if the police found a fresh grave, they should stake it out and wait for him to come back. This is shown in the 2019 film, Bundy and the Green River Killer. Also contributing to the investigation was FBI Special Agent Johnny Douglas, who developed a profile of the suspect. Ridgway was arrested in 1982 and 2001 on charges related to prostitution. He became a suspect in the Green River killings in 1983 when 18-year-old Marie Malvar disappeared. Her boyfriend and pimp later found a truck in front of Ridgway's house, which they thought was the same one she had boarded the day she went missing. Ridgway was interviewed in conjunction with that event, and police have received several other tips that mentioned him. However, in 1984, he passed the polygraph test. Around 1985, Ridgway began dating Judith Mawson, who became his third wife in 1988. Mawson claimed it in a 2010 interview that when she moved into his house while they were dating, there was no carpet. Detectives later told her that he'd probably wrapped a body in that carpet. In the same interview, she described how he would leave for work early in the morning some days, ostensibly for the overtime pay. Mawson speculated that he must have committed some of the murders while supposedly working these early morning shifts. She claimed that she had not suspected Ridgway's crimes before he was contracted by authorities in 1987, and had not even heard of the Green River killing before by the time because she didn't watch the news. Ridgway said that while he was in a relationship with Mawson, his kill rate went down because he truly loved her. Of his 49 known victims, only 3 were killed after he married Mawson. Mawson told a local television reporter, in April 1987, police took hair and saliva samples from Ridgway. The samples collected were later subjected to DNA profiling, providing the evidence for his arrest warrant. On the 30th of November 2001, he was at the Kentworth truck factory where he worked as a spray painter when police arrived to arrest him. The 4 victims named in the original indictment were Marsha Chapman, Opal Mills, Cynthia Hinds, and Carol Ann Christensen. 3 more victims, Wendy Caulfield, Deborah Bonner, and Deborah Estes, were added to the indictment after a forensic scientist identified microscopic spray paint spheres as a specific brand and composition of paint used as the Kentworth factory during the time when these victims were killed. Early in August 2003, Seattle Television News reported that Ridgway had been moved from a maximum security cell at King County Jail to an Airway Heights medium security level tank. Other news reports stated that his lawyers, led by Anthony Savage, were closing a plea bargain that would spare him the death penalty in return for his confession to a number of the Green River murders. On the 5th of November 2003, he entered a guilty plea to 48 charges of aggravated first-degree murder, as part of his plea bargain that would spare him the execution in exchange for his cooperation in locating the remains of his victims and providing other details. In his statement accompanying his guilty plea, he explained that he killed all of his victims inside King County, Washington, and had transported the dumped remains of 2 women near Portland to confuse the police. Deputy Prosecutor Jeffrey Baird noted in court that the deal contained King County Prosecuting Attorney Norm Maleng explained his decision to make the deal. On the 18th of December 2003, King County Superior Court Judge Richard A. Jones sentenced Ridgway to 48 life sentences without the possibility of parole to be served consecutively. He was also sentenced to an additional 10 years for tampering with evidence for each of the 48 victims, adding 480 years to his 48 life sentences. Later he was given another life sentence after the remains of his 49th victim were found. Ridgway led prosecutors to 3 bodies in 2003. On the 16th of August of that year, the remains of a 16-year-old girl found near Enumclaw, Washington, 40 feet from State Route 410, were pronounced as belonging to Pammy Annette Event, who had been believed to be a victim of the Green River Killer. The remains of Marie Malva and April Buttram were found in September 2003. On the 23rd of November 2005, the Associated Press reported that a weekend hiker found the skull of one of the women Ridgway admitted murdering in his 2003 plea bargain with King County prosecutors. The skull of another victim, Tracy Winston, who was 19 when she disappeared from Northgate Mall on the 12th of September 1983, was found on the 20th of November 2005 by a man hiking in a wooded area near Highway 18 near Issaquah, southeast of Seattle. This was the find that led to Ridgway's 49th life sentence. In 2023, remains discovered in 1985 and known as Bone 17 were identified as belonging to 15-year-old Laurie Ann Respotnik, who was last seen by her family in Lewis County, Washington in November 1982. Ridgway confessed to more confirmed murders than any other American serial killer. Over a period of 5 months of police and prosecutor interviews, he confessed to 48 murders, 42 of which were on the police's list of probable Green River Killer victims. On the 9th of February 2004, county prosecutors began to release the videotaped records of Ridgway's confession. In one taped interview, he initially told investigators that he was responsible for the deaths of 65 women. In another taped interview on the 31st of December 2003, Ridgway claimed to have murdered 71 victims and confessed to having sex with them before killing them, a detail which he didn't reveal until after his sentencing. In his confession, he acknowledged that he targeted prostitutes because they were and that he confessed that he had sex with his victims' bodies after he murdered them, but claimed he began burying the later victims so that he could resist the urge to commit necrophilia. Ridgway was placed in solitary confinement at Washington State Penitentiary in Walla Walla in January 2004. On the 14th of May 2015, he was transferred to the USP Florence High, a high-security federal prison east of Cancun City, Colorado. In September 2015, after a public outcry and discussions with Governor Jay Inslee, Corrections Secretary Bernie Warner announced that Ridgway would be transferred back to Washington to be easily accessible for open murder investigation. Ridgway was returned by chartered police to Washington State Penitentiary in Walla Walla from USP Florence High on the 24th of October 2015. In September 2024, Ridgway was briefly transferred from the Washington State Penitentiary to the King County Jail for a few days before being transferred back to WSP. Authorities refused to give any explanation for the transfer. The transport order was unsealed in March 2015, revealing Ridgway was temporarily transferred to help locate more victim remains. Before Ridgway's confession, authorities had attributed 49 murders to the Green River Killer. Ridgway confessed to murdering at least 71 victims. At the time of Ridgway's 18th of December 2003 sentencing, authorities had been able to find at least 48 sets of remains, including victims not originally attributed to the Green River Killer. Ridgway was sentenced to the deaths of each of these 48 victims in a plea agreement that he would Wendy Lee Caulfield, aged 16, disappeared on the 8th of July 1982 and her body was found on the 15th of July 1982. Giselle Ann Lavaughn, aged 17, disappeared on the 17th of July in 1982 and her body was found on the 25th of September 1982. Deborah Lynn Bonner, aged 23, disappeared on the 25th of July 1982 and her body was found on the 12th of October 1982. Marsha Faye Chapman, aged 31, disappeared on the 1st of August 1982 and her body was found on the 15th of August 1982. Cynthia Jean Hinz, aged 17, disappeared on the 11th of August 1982 and was also found on the 15th of August 1982. Opal Charmaine Mills, aged 16, disappeared on the 12th of August 1982 and her body was also found on the 15th of August 1982. Terry Reen Milligan, aged 16, disappeared on the 29th of August 1982 and her body was found on the 1st of April 1984. Mary Bridget Meehan, aged 16, disappeared on the 15th of September 1982 and her body was found on the 13th of November 1983. Deborah Lorraine Esther, aged 15, disappeared on the 20th of September 1982. Her body was found on the 30th of May 1988. Linda Jane Rule, aged 16, disappeared on the 26th of September 1982. Her body was found on the 31st of January 1983. Denise Darcel Bush, aged 23, disappeared on the 8th of October 1982. Her body was found on the 12th of June 1985. Shonda Lee Summers, aged 16, disappeared on the 9th of October 1982. Her body was found on the 11th of August 1983. Shirley Marie Sherrill, aged 18, disappeared between the 20th and the 22nd of October 1982. Her body was found on the 14th of June 1985. Laurie Ann Respotnik, aged 15, disappeared on the 26th of November 1982, and her body was found in December 1985. Rebecca Becky Marrero, aged 20, disappeared on the 3rd of December 1982. Her body was found on the 21st of December 2010. Colleen Renee Brockman, aged 15, disappeared on the 24th of December 1982. Her body was found on the 26th of May 1984. Sandra Denise Major, aged 20, also disappeared on the 24th of December 1982, and her body was found on the 30th of December 1985. Wendy Marie Stevens, aged 14, disappeared in March 1983, and her body was found on the 21st of March 1984. Alma Ann Smith, aged 18, disappeared on the 3rd of March 1983, and her body was found in April 1984. Dolores Laverne Williams, aged 17, disappeared between the 8th and 14th of March 1983, and her body was found on the 31st of March 1984. Gail Lynn Matthews, aged 24, disappeared on the 10th of April 1983. Her body was found on the 18th of September 1983. Andrea Marion Childers, aged 19, disappeared on the 14th of April 1983. Her body was found on the 11th of October 1989. Sandra K. Gibber, aged 17, disappeared on the 17th of April 1983. Her body was found on the 1st of April 1984. Kimmy Ray Ricks Pister, aged 16, also disappeared on the 17th of April 1983. Her body was found on the 15th of December 1983. Mary Jane Malva, aged 18, disappeared on the 30th of April 1983. Her body was found on the 26th of September 2003. Carol Ann Christensen, aged 21, disappeared on the 3rd of May 1983, and her body was found on the 8th of May 1983. Martina Teresa Authorley, aged 18, disappeared on the 22nd of May 1983, and her body was found on the 14th of November 1984. Cheryl Lee Williams, aged 18, disappeared on the 23rd of May 1983. Her body was found on the 22nd of March 1984. Ivona Tosh, aged 19, disappeared on the 31st of May 1983. Her body was found on the 15th of October 1983. Carrie Ann Royce, aged 15, disappeared between the 31st of May and the 13th of June 1983, and her body was found on the 10th of March 1985. Constance Elizabeth Nayan, aged 19, disappeared on the 8th of June 1983, and her body was found on the 27th of October 1983. Tammy Charlene Lyles, aged 16, disappeared on the 9th of June 1983. Her body was found on the 23rd of April 1985. Kelly Marine Ware, aged 22, disappeared on the 18th of July 1983. Her body was found on the 29th of October 1983. Tina Marie Thompson, aged 21, disappeared on the 25th of July 1983. Her body was found on the 20th of April 1984. April Dawn Buttram, aged 16, disappeared on the 18th of August 1983. Her body was found on the 30th of August 2003. Debbie May Abernathy, aged 26, disappeared on the 5th of September 1983. Her body was found on the 31st of March 1984. Tracy Ann Winston, aged 19, disappeared on the 12th of September 1983. Her body was found on the 27th of March 1986. Maureen Sue Feeney, aged 19, disappeared on the 28th of September 1983. Her body was found on the 2nd of May 1986. Mary Sue Bellow, aged 25, disappeared on the 11th of October 1983. Her body was found on the 12th of October 1984. Pammy Annette Even, aged 15, disappeared on the 26th of October 1983. Her body was found on the 16th of August 2003. Denise Louise Plager, aged 22, disappeared on the 30th of October 1983. Her body was found on the 14th of February 1984. Kimberly Nelson, aged 21, disappeared on the 1st of November 1983. Her body was found on the 14th of June 1986. Lisa Lorraine Yates, aged 19, disappeared on the 23rd of December 1983. Her body was found on the 13th of March 1984. Mary Azeza West, aged 16, disappeared on the 6th of February 1984. Her body was found on the 8th of September 1985. Cindy Ann Smith, aged 17, disappeared on the 21st of March 1984. Her body was found on the 27th of June 1987. Patricia Michelle Barjac, aged 19, disappeared on the 17th of October 1986, and her body was found on the 3rd of February 1993. Roberta Joseph Hayes, aged 21, disappeared on the 7th of February 1987. Her body was found on the 11th of September 1991. Marta Reeves, aged 36, disappeared on the 5th of March 1990. Her body was found on the 20th of September 1990. Patricia Ann Yellowrobe, aged 38, disappeared in January 1988, and her body was found in August 1998. Facial approximation of Jane Doe B17, who was identified as Raspotnik after DNA testing in 2023. Before Ridgway's confession, authorities had not attributed the Green River Killer to the deaths of Rule, Bergerac, Hayes, Reeves, Yellowrobe, and Jane Doe B20. On the 21st of December 2010, hikers near the West Valley Highway in Auburn, Washington, found a skull in the vicinity where Marie Malva's remains had been found in 2003. The skull was identified as belonging to Marrero, who was last seen leaving the Western Six Motel at South 108th Street and Pacific Highway South on the 3rd of December 1982. The King County prosecutor claimed that Ridgway would be formally charged with her murder on the 11th of February 2011. On the 18th of February 2011, he entered a guilty plea in the murder of Rebecca Marrero, adding a 49th life sentence to his existing 48. Ridgway confessed to murdering Marrero in his original plea bargain, but due to insufficient evidence, the charges could not be filled. Therefore, there is no charge in his current incarceration status. The remains of Winston were found without a skull in Kent's Cottonwood Grove Park in March 1986. Winston's skull was found in November 2005 near Tiger Mountain, miles away from where the discovery site of the rest of her body was. Police assume someone carried it to the location. Major was not identified until June 2012. A family member asked the King County Sheriff to investigate after seeing a TV movie about Ridgway. DNA confirmed Major's identity. Bundy Stevens, previously known as Jane Doe B10, was previously unidentified. Ridgway claimed that she was a white female in her early 20s and possibly had brown hair. Examination of the remains suggested that she was actually between 12 and 18, most likely around 15. She was later confirmed to be 14. Analysis of her skeleton indicated that she was probably left-handed and that she had at one point in her life had a skull fracture to the left of her temple that later healed. Jane Doe B17 was discovered on the 2nd of January 1986. Remains that had been found in another area on the 18th of February 1984 were later matched to her. In 2003, Ridgway claimed responsibility for her death. In December 2023, DNA testing at Paraben Nanolabs identified her as Laurie Ann Raspotnik, who had run away from home in 1982 at the age of 15. Jane Doe B20 was discovered in August 2003. Because the remains were partial, her face could not be constructed and her race could not be determined, but she was estimated to have been between 13 and 24 at the time of her death. She was estimated to have been murdered between 1970 and 1993, but was believed to have been murdered during the first decade of Ridgway's murder spree. In January 2024, DNA testing identified the victim as Lyles. A separate set of remains from Lyles had been found in Oregon in 1985 and identified in 1988 from dental records. Ridgway is suspected of, but not charged with, murdering the remaining 6 women of the original list attributed to the Green River Killer. Amina Adjashev, aged 35, disappeared on the 7th of July 1982 and her body was found on the 18th of April 1984. Casey Ann Lee, aged 16, disappeared on the 28th of August 1982 and her remains have never been found. Kelly Ann McGuinness, aged 18, disappeared on the 28th of June 1983. Her body has also never been discovered. Angela Marie Gerdner, aged 16, disappeared in July 1983 and her body was found on the 22nd of April 1985. Patricia Osborne, aged 19, disappeared on the 20th of October 1983 and her body also remains undiscovered. Ridgway denied killing Adjashev, who doesn't fit the profile of any of the victims of the Green River Killer, considering her age, and she was not a sex worker or a teenage runaway. Although he has never been charged with her murder, during police interrogations in 2003, Ridgway did confess to killing Lee. He stated that he strangled her in 1982 and left her body near a drive-in theatre off the SeaTac Strip. Law enforcement officials have been unable to locate Lee's remains at the dump site that Ridgway indicated. Evidence exists to suggest that Ridgway murdered McGuinness. Shortly before her disappearance, McGuinness was questioned by a Port of Seattle police officer while dating Ridgway near the SeaTac Strip. Furthermore, during the summer of 2003, Ridgway led authorities to the bodies of several of his victims. One of those bodies, later identified as that of April Buttram, was initially identified by Ridgway as being that of McGuinness. According to Ridgway, he often confused McGuinness with Buttram because of their similar physiques. Ridgway is suspected in the death of Gardiner, whose remains were discovered within a mile of the bodies of the known victims of Cheryl, Bush, and Niles. Gardiner remained unidentified until October 2009. Unidentified black female, age unknown, disappeared in December 1980 and her body has never been discovered. Christy Lynn Vorak, age 13, disappeared on the 31st of October 1982 and her remains have never been discovered. Patricia Ann LeBlanc, age 15, disappeared on the 12th of August 1983. Her body has also never been discovered. Rose Marie Curran, age 16, disappeared on the 26th of August 1987. Her body was found on the 31st of August 1987. Cora Christmas McGurk, age 22, disappeared on the 12th of July 1991, and her remains have never been discovered. An unidentified black female, possibly bearing the first name Michelle, was a possible victim of Ridgway. She has never been located or identified. McGurk was the mother of NBA player Martell Webster. She was last seen leaving her 3 children in the company of her aunt. Her vehicle was found near Aurora Avenue North. Although her body was never found, Ridgway is thought to be responsible for killing her. Ridgway was long suspected in the 1987 murder of Curran, an 18-year-old addict and prostitute, but was ruled out as a suspect. In 2004, Phil Hansen created and displayed an artwork depicting Gary Ridgway's face, composed of 11,792 portraits of his 48 victims.